Congresswoman Virginia Foxx with a legislative update. I am really pleased today to have with me the House Parliamentarian, Mr. John Sullivan, who is going to give us some background on what the parliamentarian does, give us a little history of the parliamentarian's office, and how that relates to the Rules Committee, on which I have the honor to serve. Mr. Sullivan's been around since I first came to Congress 6 years ago, but I never had a chance to hear him talk about the role of the parliamentarian until very recently. And as soon as I heard him speak, I knew that I wanted to get him to come on and do one of these segments with me so that we could share the exciting history of this office with the people in the 5th District. So I'll start out, Mr. Sullivan, by saying, tell the folks who are watching this a little bit about your background and how you came to be the House Parliamentarian.
Thank you for having me. Very many of the members of our office come straight out of law school and make the office of the parliamentarian basically their life's work for their whole legal career. I was a lateral entry because I was an Air Force officer, and I owed the Air Force some time. And as I neared the end of my active duty service commitment, I received an offer to come over and work for the House, and I was interested by that, so I took it. And that was in when Mr. O'Neill was the Speaker. Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. So Mr. Boehner is now the 7th Speaker that I've seen in the House. And I've spent 25 years in the office of the parliamentarian at this point.
Well, now, that you don't look old enough, Mr. Sullivan, to have had a career in the military and to be here 25 years.
Well, I didn't have a 20-year career.
Okay,
I went to college at the Air Force Academy, and my first assignment from there was go to law school. And so I owed the Air Force for that education. Okay. And that was quite a number of years. And as I neared the end of that commitment, I was looking for another job, and I was surprised to receive an overture from the House of Representatives, but I'm glad I did. I joined the office of the parliamentarian, and it's an office of it's very stable, a lot of longevity among my predecessors. Since the office was made a statutory entity in 1928, there have been only 4 parliamentarians. I'm the 4th, and I've only been parliamentarian for 6 years. So. As you can see, my predecessors had quite a bit of longevity.
So you and I came in about the same time.
Yes, I became the head of the office about the time that you joined the House of Representatives. That's right. The office is a group of nonpartisan lawyers who are to assist the House, the Speaker and the presiding officers, but also the committee and their counsel and the members and their staffs with the rules, both those ordained under the Constitution and those adopted by the House from time to time.
And something that you mentioned today was about the volumes that have been written about the actions taken by the parliamentarian over the years. Talk a little bit about the role that you play in the House. I think it's very important that people understand it is nonpartisan, and we all respect you in that position as being nonpartisan. So when you make a decision, your decision is not there to favor one party or another, but merely to uphold the rules of the House. Is that a correct thing to say?
We try to render our advice without political favor or affection, and try to sort of ignore the substance in favor of the procedure. It's important, and we are quick to admit that we do not make rulings. The decision is not that of the parliamentarian, but rather of the presiding officer. We advise the presiding officer on what the correct decision would be under the rule and under the precedents, previous decisions construing that rule. And we try to make sure that we apply pertinent precedent to each procedural question as it arises, so that we can engender the sort of consistency and predictability in the procedures of the House that will make people feel like it's a legitimate show. And feel that they're being treated fairly because they can see how a similar procedural dispute was resolved in 1936, in 1987, and in 2007. And that when the same facts arise, the same algorithm will be used by the presiding officer to resolve the dispute. Our primary mission is in real time to advise, first of all, the person who's wielding the gavel on the floor, but also the other combatants, if you will, in the procedural fray. But our second mission, but by no means a lesser mission, is to write down what happened and why it happened so that we can publish the precedents of the House. When a presiding officer authoritatively resolves a dispute on sound analysis, that formula should be captured and applied to the next like dispute so that the House can continue its reputation for stare decisis, to stand by your decisions and resolve things on a consistent and predictable basis over time.
And when we had H.R. 1 recently, and we had so many amendments, I think that the parliamentarian was a little more active than in other cases where a lot of amendments haven't been offered. Is that a fair thing to say?
That's correct. The Committee on Rules recommended to the House an order of business for consideration of that bill that was very accommodating of a robust amendment process. It essentially said if a member of Congress wants to offer an amendment that is otherwise in order, if it doesn't change the topic, the germaneness rule, if it doesn't bust the budget, then it can be considered, and the person who offers it can speak for 5 minutes in favor of it, and any other member can speak for 5 minutes on it as well. And in that way, the 5-minute rule of not unending but very robust debate can take place on a broad range of amendments. And that does make us rather busy during the consideration of the bill, more so than in a more scripted environment where the Rules Committee might have a bill because of the delicacy of the subject matter or because of the controversiality of the issues and how refined they have been in previous debates. The Rules Committee might cut to the chase, if you will, and recommend that the House adopt a more tailored, a tighter, more scripted process for amending a bill. And there's a little bit less procedural footwork to do in that sort of environment.
Say a little bit more. That's a good few comments about the Rules Committee, but if you would say a little more about your role as it relates to the Rules Committee, because again, you were speaking to the members of the Rules Committee when you piqued my interest a great deal in the work of the parliamentarian. Before you answer that, though, let me make a comment. If people are ever watch on C-SPAN or in the chamber and watch, they will see one of you all from the parliamentarian's office standing to the right of the speaker and helping the speaker go through the procedures, because you all have such extensive experience in this, and most people who are in the speaker's chair have much more limited experience. And so we can see the parliamentarians at work every day and all the time that we're in session. So you all are almost invisible, but not really, because you're out there with us every day. So talk a little bit, if you would, about the relationship to the Rules Committee.
Well, we work with all of the committee chairmen and their counsel and the other members of the committees as well. But I think we probably work more closely with the Committee on Rules than any other. First of all, because their jurisdiction is mostly procedural in character. And second, because they are such an important instrument of the legislative process and the way the House executes a legislative program. And so much of their work product is a very finely tuned document called a Special Order of Business Resolution, the H-Res, that is a rule from the Rules Committee. So we help the Rules Committee, we ascertain what the Rules Committee thinks ought to be the scheme for consideration of a measure, and we discuss the wrinkles and rough edges and so forth in such a scheme, and the way to best tailor the process toward the instant mission. And then we help with the wording of a special order of business resolution. What black letter in that resolution will ordain the process that the Rules Committee wishes to recommend to the House. A lot of people talk about the Rules Committee sometimes when they're casting blame as the Rules Committee did this, the Rules Committee did that, but it's important to remember that the Rules Committee proposes that the House do X. And the Rules Committee has a constituency for these special order business resolutions, the members of the House. And if they were to get too aggressive with the terms of a resolution, it might be rejected by the House. So it's not as though the Rules Committee are a bunch of autocrats who just dictate the procedure for a measure. They're experts in the process who give an expert's recommendation to the House on a proposed procedure for a given measure.
Let me restate what you just said in a little more of a layman's terms.
Okay. I get that a lot.
When we are going to debate a substantive bill on the floor, the committee chairman has to come to the Rules Committee to get a rule. Mm-hmm. And that rule then lays out the parameters of the debate and whether amendments will be, whether it'll be an open amendment process or structured rule, which limits amendments, or a closed rule, which means no amendments. So all of that is laid out in what's called the rule. Mm-hmm. And as you said, the House can reject it. And the way the House rejects that is because we have to vote on the rule.
That's right.
So oftentimes when people are in the gallery with me, I'll have to explain, we're first voting on the rule, and then we're going to vote on the bill after debate, which has been outlined by the rule.
That's
so,
right.
Did I said that okay?
Yes, and the fundamental reason for the need for a rule is that the average legislative measure is not privileged for consideration. The chairman of the Armed Services Committee cannot just walk out on the floor and say, I'd like to do the defense authorization bill now, because it's not a privileged measure. It needs to be accorded privilege by the House, and the way the House accords privilege to it, to make it an order of business, is to adopt a rule for its consideration. And so the rule that the Rules Committee reports says resolved that on adoption of this rule, it'll be in order to do the defense authorization bill. And here is how we're going to do it. And then the parameters of consideration, the length of debate and the range of amendment and those sorts of things can be addressed in the rule from the Rules Committee. It can be as detailed or as open as the traffic might dictate for that particular situation.
I didn't hear you refer to this when we talked earlier, but it is important for people to understand that the House is a very deliberative body, and that one individual can't just go in, as you say, and offer something on the floor. There is a process to go through. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, very important for people to understand, because a lot of times my constituents will say, I want you to do so-and-so and so-and-so, and they really don't understand that there are constraints on individual members.
Right, and there are over 400 representatives, and each of them represents maybe 700,000 Americans or thereabouts. And so there has to be some way to organize. There's a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resource. And so there's a sort of a triage process on what to do first and what to do next. And so in the House, there's a very well-developed hierarchy of procedures and precedences and privilege and so forth to govern the flow of measures to the floor. Right. In the Senate, I think it's even more deliberative.
I tell people it's like watching paint dry over in the Senate, but I won't ask you to comment on that.
Well, I think that what the founders intended in the two chambers is aptly reflected in their different procedures.
Right. Well, I really appreciate your coming in, and we do have to mention that there is no Rules Committee in the Senate. The Rules Committee operates only in the House, and it makes it a very unique thing. I'm so grateful to you, and I hope I can get you back again so we can talk some more about this and explain a little bit more to the American people. This is Congresswoman Virginia Foxx with a legislative update.